My name is Blace, and today we're going to work through two examples regarding weighted averages. You can see that I've written up here the syllabus for the theoretical class. Let's say the homework's worth 10%, quizzes 20, each exam worth 15%, so adding up to 45%, and a final which is worth 25%. Let's take a student, let's say they received a 100% on the homework. So our first step is going to be to divide the 100% by 100% to see the total amount they received on the homework. So divided by 100%, and that's going to give us 1. And then what we want to do is multiply that by the weight of each section. So for homework, that would be 10%. 1 times 10% is 10%, so the student received a 10% on the homework. For quizzes, let's say the student received an 89%. We are going to again divide that by 100%. That's going to give us a decimal of 0.89. And as I said before, quizzes are 20%, so we will multiply 0.89 by 20%. This will give us a percentage of 17.8%. And for right now, we're going to keep all of our decimal places as it will give us the most accurate answer, but at the end we will condense to 2 sig figs. So let's mark where we will stop. So for the first exam, let's say the student received a 90%. That will give them a percentage of 13.5%, or I'm sorry, got ahead of myself, 0.90, and we're going to multiply that by 15%, which will then give them a percentage of 13.5%. Next, for exam 2, we'll say 85%. This will give them a decimal of 0.85, multiplied by the 15%. And this should be a percentage of 12.75%. For the last exam, we'll say they studied really hard and received a 97%. So they will receive 0.97 there, times the 15%. And that should give them a percentage of 14.55%. Lastly, for the final, the student thinks they're doing really well in the class, so they don't study for the final and receive a 70%. Divide that by 100%, 0.70, and we're going to multiply that by the 25%, giving the student a 17.5%. So the next step is to add all of these up. When we do so, we get 85.8%. And as I said before, we're going to condense this to 2 sig figs. So this student will receive an 86% in the class. So that is the first scenario. In this video, we're going to work through a different scenario for weighted averages. So as you can see, we already have calculated with the syllabus 15% for the homework, 5% for the quizzes, 15% for the first exam, 17% for the second, and 18% for the third, and a 30% final. In this scenario, we're going to calculate what we need on the final to receive grades of either an A at 93%, a B at 85%, or a C at 75%. So as you saw in the last video, what we did was multiply what the student received on each section, divided that by 100 to get the decimal, and multiply that by the weight of each section. So as you can see, the student received a 90% on the homework, giving them a 0.90 times 15%, or a 13.5% off for the homework. Same for the quizzes. They received 100% on the quizzes, so 1 times 5%, they received 5%. 85% on exam 1, 0.85 times 15%, 12.75%. 90% on exam 2 divided by 100, 0.90 times 17% is 15.3%. And a 93% on exam 3, 0.93 times 18% was 16.74%. This gives the student 63.29% of the class. Now, as you can see, they've only gone through 70% of the class. So if we want to calculate what they have now, we'll just divide this by 70%, and that'll give you 90% in the class. So now what we need to do is calculate what they need on the final, and we'll start with the A to receive a 93%, sorry. So 63.29. What we need to do with this is add it to the final, what you could receive on the final, but we're going to multiply it by a variable or the grade you receive on the final. So plus 30x, and this is all going to be set equal to the 93%, or 93 in this case. So what we first need to do is subtract 63.29 from each side, and this will give us 30x equals 29.71. Now we should divide by 30 on each side. We see that x equals 0.99. This means that, well, we'll multiply this by 100 first. The student will need a 99% on the final exam to receive a 93% in the class. So now we'll calculate for a B. And we said 85%, so 85. Subtract the 63.29 and we get 21.71. Divide that by 30 and you see the student needs a 0.72 or a 72% in the class. Or I'm sorry, a 72% on the final to receive an 85% in the class. And for the last scenario, the student to receive a 75, or in this case a C, we'll subtract the 63.29, that is 11.71, divide by 30, and we see the student only needs 0.39 times 100, a 39% on the final to receive a 75 in the class.